5 days out from the election, the Labor Party was targeted yesterday by farmers angry at its plan to charge for their use of water. The farmer protest yesterday took place in Morrinsville, which is the hometown for the Labor leader Jacinda Ardern. And here's what some of the protesters said. We got that? No. It wasn't pretty though, was it, Jacinda?
I got the general gist from some of the images yesterday, that's fair to say.
Yeah, thank you for joining us this morning. Appreciate that. Did you take it as personal? Some fairly sort of robust signs?
Oh, no, I didn't take it personally. Look, the Waikato is the first place I ever ran for Parliament, and it was the first place I was ever booed at a Federated Farmers meeting, at that time talking about environmental issues. Look, I accept there's real strength of feeling around this, absolutely. And even though that area is essentially not particularly affected at all by what we're proposing on a water royalty, they will be positively affected by what we can do for the rivers and waterways in that area.
Rural ruckus was the way that the Waikato Times described it. They're upset. There's a depth of feeling there.
Yeah. And I don't want to trivialise that. I accept that. But I absolutely believe that we are still united in the view that we do need to improve our river and water quality in New Zealand. I know that there are a group of farmers who are absolutely environmentalists, who do want to see us lift our game. They may dispute some of the ways that we intend to do that. But I intend in office to work together to bring unity around this issue.
Right. It's good to get the overview. Let's get into some of the detail of it. Because you want to be clear and transparent with farmers, right?
As much as I can be. Okay. And I will put up front some of the numbers that we have, I acknowledge are out of date. Some of the numbers we have publicly available are based on agricultural census from Stats. That hasn't been done for some time. So just that disclaimer I put out there, I'm using the numbers that we have from Irrigation New Zealand that are from 2012 and 2013. And I acknowledge there's been more irrigation since then. So I'll use the stats I have, but some of them do need to be updated.
Okay. Well, you're responsible for your own policy, though.
Indeed.
So let's get into that. What is the water tax that farmers are going to pay?
Between 1 and 2 cents per 1,000 litres of water. It excludes, however, stock water and municipal supply. So it's mostly going to affect those who use irrigation.
Why isn't that in your policy?
It is in our policy.
But when you released the policy, there wasn't a number there, was there?
The 1 to 2 cents, we always talked about it being much lower than what, for instance, someone who is a water bottler might pay.
Yeah, but it's not in your policy, though, is it?
I think there was a reference.
Here it is. There
has been a reference in the past to tenfold. We certainly clarified on the campaign trail when we heard some of the ridiculous statements being made.
Yeah, but that's the issue, though, eh? So I go to your policy that's on the website, and correct me if you can find it here, if there's a number, because I can't see a number in the policy. When I go to the policy, there's not a number on it.
If you were at my first stand-up when we announced this policy, it was at the EDS forum, we talked about cents per litre. So we were very clear that the range was very, very small.
Yeah, but one of the numbers that you're using is double one of the other numbers that you're using.
And I've maintained the 1 to 2 cent range because, as I've said, I want to sit down with those affected and make sure we set the price at the right point, because I've always said we need to ensure that people are able to maintain their profitability. So, yes, I kept a range, but that was because I wanted to work with sectors affected before we set it in stone.
Okay. Is it going to be consistent? Do people pay the same across the country?
There will be. We've left open the room for us to look at scarcity issues, and, for instance, water bottlers will pay more. So we have said that if you're taking from a pristine aquifer, we'll treat that differently than someone, for instance, who is using lower quality water on a farm, for instance.
You could have multiple rates in place across the country.
Well, look, for our minerals regime, we have different rates. That's not new for royalty regimes, and it wouldn't be fair if we treated water from a pristine aquifer that's being bottled and sent offshore the same way that we would someone who's using, water of a lower quality.
Yeah, but your policy says that the royalty per cubic metre of water used could vary from region to region, or within a region.
We do
within a region.
Yeah, we do want to take into account the difference that exists across the country in terms of water quality and also water use. And I think actually, and that's what we've said, we want to make sure that wherever we're applying this, that we are taking into account scarcity and quality, and that's actually.
So what about a product that gets made through processes across different regions?
products.
Well, if you're growing several different products to create something,
it's the
and
water,
they're being grown across different regions, it sounds like it's going to be quite a complex measurement.
Not at all. No, not at all. Of course, I think that people would expect that we would take into account the quality of the product the water that they're drawing from. I think they would expect that, and we apply that same kind of focus on our royalty regime. That's not new, but to keep it into perspective, I think from numbers that I've seen, only 5% of veggie, 4% of fruit crops are using irrigation schemes. So it's a small number. And to keep it in perspective again, Guyan, we are 4 days out from the election. We are only having this conversation because we have 60% of our waterways that can't be swum in because they are not safe. And I want to draw back to that. 9 years the government's had to deal with this issue. They've got a working group on water. We don't actually know what the government's going to do on this issue. We know what Labor's going to do. We've been debating it.
But you can't tell us what the tax rates are. You can't tell us what the tax rates are.
I've given a range.
Well, you have.
I've given a range. And I've given a set of expectations and a commitment to work together. But ultimately, surely, New Zealand, I hope, will see that all of this conversation is happening because we cannot just sustain the way that we're working now. It's not working for New Zealand.
How does taxing water help us clean up the rivers? You're going to get how much from this a year?
Yeah, twofold. It has a twofold effect.
How much are you going to get from it?
There's been estimates of 100 million, but again, it does depend on the rate.
What do you reckon the best number is? You're the leader of the party.
That's the number.
$100 million?
That's the number our spokesperson has given us.
100 million.
That's the number my spokesperson's produced.
But we would use an appropriate metaphor, is a drop in the bucket in terms of what it's going to cost to clean up our rivers, isn't it? Why would you go through all this?
And then again, that's the point, isn't it? Because we can either say then that those who use our water contribute, or that every single taxpayer pays for it. We've got to pay for it somehow. We've come up with a regime that we think is the fairest way to pay for it and actually will help us make decisions around water use.
You don't take that approach to a number of other issues, whether it's healthcare or other things in New Zealand. We say that we pay that from the public purse, don't we?
For instance, our tourism levy. We've asked our tourists to help contribute. For resolving Auckland's congestion problems, we've asked Aucklanders to help. So we have tried to find ways to solve these 9 years of problems rather than just taking from everyone.
But you're running surpluses in your projections of billions. Why don't you use that money?
Pretty narrowly focused. Let's draw back to some of the big issues we've got to resolve this election. $2.3 billion has been cut out of health. We're going to have to try and reinvest to just catch up so that people can get the doctor's appointments and the specialist care that they need.
And we're going to talk to Jonathan Coleman about some real holes in that a little bit later on.
We're already having to draw on the public purse to make sure that we can cover those costs. There really isn't a lot of room left.
Fair enough. I want to move to a couple of other issues that are related to this. Fairness. You've talked a lot about fairness on the campaign. And you say in your policy, we say that when a public resource such as this is being used for commercial profit, the public has a right to get a return on it by way of a royalty. So that's the principle that underpins this. So why does Coca-Cola not have to pay under your scheme?
We've excluded those who already pay. So, for instance, you and I, as people living in Auckland, pay $1.20 per 1,000 litres for water use. Coke pay $1 per 1,000 litres. And so that keeps it in perspective that what we're asking others currently who are using and not paying anything to pay 1 or 2 cents.
Yeah, but so this is your rohi, this is Waikato. They draw 36 million litres a year from South Waikato Coke, right? They pay $40,000 a year for that. It's like a pretty good deal.
Yeah.
Why do they get excluded?
And some of that, I understand that they might own some of those water bottling plants, and that's exactly what we're trying to create is consistency. Yeah, so where they're drawing...
But the people who produce our milk and our vegetables and our fruit are going to pay, and the people who make Coke are paying.
They already pay. They already pay.
They don't pay very much.
They pay $1 per 1,000 litres. Where they're water bottling at the moment, they might not, and that's exactly why we're doing this. Under Labour, they will. If they are water bottling, they will pay, and they will pay far more than anyone who's using it for dairy.
And they'll pay a royalty
vegetables.
on that because the water bottlers pay, don't they? But again,
they haven't been, and that's why we're doing this. They will.
And here's a question for you: what will they pay? What's the royalty?
We've talked of it being as a magnitude. For instance, if we've got someone that's paying $1 or 2 cents, they might pay 10. It will be higher than anyone.
But here's the thing.
For the reason that I've
said, we keep coming back to
because
on the whole
if they're
campaign.
drawing from a pristine aquifer, they're drawing some of our best and finest water. They're then bottling it and sending it offshore with very little value add to it. That's a resource that all of us own and have a stake in. They're making a profit of it and not giving anything back to New Zealand
that
for
will
it.
resonate with a lot of people, what you're saying.
And so for fairness' sake, there's a flow on.
But here's my question. What will the number be?
That's I've said in the order of 10 cents
But
versus 1 or 2 cents.
When you're putting a policy manifesto to the country, why can't you ever put numbers on these things? Because you're asking people to vote and to make these decisions.
To be fair to you, you haven't been on the campaign trail with every point that I have talked about that and that David Parker has done that. We have. We've talked in
to
the
be
order.
fair to the voters, they are not there at every stand-up. This ain't about me. You are saying these policies, but I said it here and there. When you go to the website and you look at the policies, there's no numbers there.
We've always talked about tenfold versus singular. But again, New Zealand has asked us to take on this issue, and we have. We've also said in office, this is the magnitude of what we anticipate this royalty costing. But what I've always also wanted to maintain is the ability to sit down with those affected and make sure it's workable. We've got to accept that in opposition, we have certain access to information and resource that sometimes we will make estimates of the best way to make it workable, but sometimes we need to refine when we're in office. Yeah. We've given a pledge of what we will do.
You gave a pledge on what you would do with the tax working group and the capital gains, and you flip-flopped on that. Are you going to flip-flop on this one?
I'm still doing the tax working group, and I'm still
just
undertaking that work. A couple of months longer to make sure we've given certainty.
What about this? Because we saw what happened under heat, and you flip-flopped on it.
And I'm taking heat, and I'm holding firm on this. This is the right thing to do. And Guyon, I maintain I'm still doing that tax working group work. The urgency is there. For the sake of a few months, I can also give certainty to people as well, and that was important.
Just a few days before the people who haven't voted already vote. What's your message in this final part of the campaign?
That, we have 9 years of drift, big problems in housing, in healthcare in particular, and with our cleaning up our rivers. We already know what the national government's plan was on all of these fronts. They've had 9 years to fix them. I think it's time now to give another party a go to resolve these issues.
Thanks very much for your time. Really do appreciate you coming into the studio. That is Jacinda Ardern, who is the Labour Party leader, and it's 26.
Morning reports. Less than 2 weeks after Irma, Hurricane Maria strengthens to a Category 3 hurricane as it heads through the Caribbean islands. We'll be talking to a New Zealander in its path. Also, Southland District Health Board's Chief Medical Officer offers to resign if things don't improve. We'll hear from the Health Minister, and we'll hear why staff member at Vehicle Testing New Zealand handed over the name and address of a police informant to a patched gang member. Let's get the headlines first with Nicola Wright.